Hi, I'm Dr. Vonda Wright, and this is Hot for Your Health. Join us for conversations on the bleeding edge of science, health, and culture as we bring you tech innovators, thought leaders, and the movers and shakers who are transforming science fiction into your new health reality. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Vonda Wright. Thank you so much for joining us again on Hot for Your Health. And this interview has been a long time coming because the ladies at Feisty Menopause said, you got to get to know this doc because the two of you could really take over the world. And I think what they meant by that is we could help so many people. And when I introduce her, you'll see that our fields of study, we're both physicians, both surgeons, are so aligned with what we're doing. So Dr. Carla DiGirolamo. Did I say that?
You were close. It's DiGirolamo.
Oh my God, it's so much more beautiful when you say it. DiGirolamo.
I've been saying it for a while.
You have a little bit. Dr. Carla DiGirolamo is a double board certified obstetrician, gynecology with a specialty in fertility and reproductive endocrinology. So she didn't just get those degrees. She got them at the Ivies at Brown and at Harvard. So on top of that, she lives what she preaches in terms of her practice in athletic aging. She is not only a CrossFitter herself, but a CrossFit instructor. So we have so much to talk about, Dr. Carla. I'm so glad to have you here today.
I'm so happy to be here, Vonda. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. You know, as women have noticed what I'm talking about on Instagram, I have this theme of questions that many people have. And I just wanted to go through some of those today. The second of those questions will be all about HRT, but the first one, I want to talk a little bit about cortisol, if you don't mind, right? So I'm going to tell you my history and then you can do your expertise. I was a dancer, then I was a marathon runner, and then I got onto the high intensity interval training every single day kick because I like that dopamine and adrenaline and I get bored. And I'm like, let me pound this out. But every time I did that for a series of time, I would get left Achilles tendon, I would get a right, because my mechanics, right hip flexor, and it would shut me down because I was so intense all the time. So now I've gotten smarter as I age, and I still do high intensity a few times a week, but I am zone 2ing and I'm lifting heavy shit all the time. And I don't get hurt and I don't feel as revved up. So I want you to talk to us about this whole cortisol debate. Is working out making us too stressed out? Don't we need good stress? What is eustress versus stress? You know what I mean? Because you're an endocrinologist. You are the hormone doctor of the doctors. Let's talk about cortisol first.
Yeah, this is a hot topic, and I've done a number of podcasts and been invited for a number of podcasts on this particular topic because it's so controversial and it can get very heated out there and there's also a lot of misinformation. So cortisol it's not just one hormone, it's a system. So the stress response system is not just cortisol, although cortisol is at the center of it, but there's lots of other stuff that goes on in the stress response system. It's mediated by the brain stem, norepinephrine, epinephrine, those are your adrenaline hormones. There are lots and lots of hormones involved in this system, but we refer to it as cortisol just because that's what people are familiar with. So, you know, it's essential for life. It's a hormone we cannot live without. And there are diseases. Addison's disease is one where cortisol isn't being produced and people will die without replacement of cortisol. So it's an essential life hormone. And it is tied in with the stress response system because it is also a hormone that is integral for survival. If we are presented with a threat, whether it's physical, mental, or whatever, our cortisol system jacks up so that we can immediately combat that threat. So it's essential for our normal daily living and it's essential for survival. And the survival piece of it is a lot like when we engage in sports. So when you're running a marathon, those same systems that will help you fend off a threat are going to get you through that marathon. So the cortisol system is essential for physical performance. But like any system, it can go into overdrive. And so the problem isn't the system and that it's there and that it's working. It's how we manage the overdrive. And so without cortisol, we can't live, we can't function, we can't perform. But if we overdrive it, that is going to cause injury. It's going to cause what you experienced. It just shuts you down for a time period. So what we have to do is we have to learn how to manage that overdrive that got us through what we needed to get through, so that we can return that system back to its baseline so that you can do it all over again. And it takes a bit. At different stages of hormonal life, we have, when we were of reproductive age, we had cycling hormones. Estrogen was, is produced with ovulation, every month. And that estrogen presence provides a buffer. It's like a shock absorber. We can handle stress a lot better during that phase of our life. And then as we enter perimenopause and menopause, when we're losing those menstrual cycles, our buffer is no longer quite as effective. And so the impact of cortisol overdrive hits us a little bit harder. So just like with probably all the injuries that you see to rotator cuffs and the conditions that you perform surgery for, our hormones are no different. They change with age as well. And so we just have to learn how to manage them. And it's about the management. It's not about avoiding the overdrive. You can't. Your cortisol system is here to stay. It's your friend. It's your life force. But we have to know how to be kind to it, and we have to know how to rein it in so that it can keep working for us, so that we can keep getting fitter, faster, stronger, even into our 70s, 80s, 90s.
I love that explanation and the linear way you've gone through it. And what it prompts me to put out there is a word we don't hear in social media very much. It's either black or white. There's our bodies, people who are listening, are tightly controlled by the systems, not only cortisol stress response system, but every system within a perfect range. It's called homeostasis. Our body wants to stay. It does not like peaks and valleys. It likes flat plateaus. And so every system upregulates, downregulates on a minute by second by microsecond basis. And that's really what you're talking about, living in a state of homeostasis, so that when we do jack up our cortisol to run away from a tiger and a bear, it can return to, whether that's your boss, your family, whatever, working out too hard, it can return to baseline and you can be healthy. But let me ask you a really controversial and heated question. Is many hormone experts that I see and read say that there is very little role for this very popular test called the Dutch test, which measures hormones and cortisol in urine across 4 time points. When you are concerned with the stress response system, do you measure it? Do you measure it in saliva or urine? Is there a role for that? Or educate me, because I really need this information.
So I'm very old school when it comes to medicine. And I remember my mentors always used to say, you're going to get most information. 90% of what you need is going to come from talking to your patient. And in this age of tech nowadays, it's very easy to rely on technology and blood tests to diagnose your patient. Now, I will sit with my patients for an hour. When I do my endocrine consultations, I want to know a lot of details about their everyday lives, how they react to it, how they sleep, what are their menstrual cycles doing. And I learn most of what I need to know from that history. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with the Dutch test. When patients come to me and bring their Dutch test results with them, it certainly adds some color to what they're experiencing. And so I often use tests to exclude chronic disease. So when menopausal women come to me and they're talking about hot flashes, I run a thyroid check because I want to make sure that that heat intolerance isn't because they have Graves' disease or some other hyperthyroidism. So the hormone tests are very valuable for helping us to exclude chronic disease. It's a supporting actor. It's not the main role. It's not the main star of the show. But I do use them.
Okay. I love that answer. It's a very rational answer versus, again, it's bad, it's good, don't use it, it's a scam, it's a supporting actor. And do you feel that way for all components of it? Because it has the cortisol component, it has the hormone component, and some experts would say that hormone switch levels rise and fall so fast that one moment in time is not the story. How do you, you're an endocrinologist, tell us the truth.
So the truth is there are some hormones in these very complex hormone pathways that are stable in blood and urine that you can detect. And there are some that disappear the second that they're formed. So I'd like to appreciate the complexity. What I usually tell people to do is go onto Google and go onto Google Images and type in, you could put in cortisol pathway, you could put in estrogen pathway. And what you will get are these images of these hugely complex flow charts of all of the hormones and metabolites that are participating in that response. And so probably a fraction of them, maybe 2 or 3 out of 20, can actually be detectable in the bloodstream. So when you get blood tests, again, it's just a supporting actor because there's so much else going on that you can't detect with modern tests. So that's why when you get a cortisol level, okay, it's important to keep that in context with what the patient's telling you, but there are 50 other metabolites that are playing a role that you have no capacity to measure.
Got it.
Not just in one instant of time, but throughout the hours and the days and the menstrual cycle as a whole. When I have people that come to me with their reproductive hormones, their FSH, estradiol, LH, all of that, they show it's like, look at this, my progesterone is deficient. It's like, well, no, it's not because you haven't ovulated yet. You're in the pre-ovulatory phase of your cycle. If you check your progesterone in a week, it's going to be where normal, what people say is normal is. So not only is there a whole lot of stuff going on in any instant of time that we can't detect, that just tells you the instant of time. That doesn't tell you what your body's doing an hour, a day, or a week from that point that you took the test.
Well, and what this brings me to is back to your very salient point, talking versus tech. It's not only a doctor talking to a person, but it's a person talking to themselves. I always ask people when I bring them in I have a program called Precision Longevity. And when we're talking about nutrition, for instance, I cannot begin to help you understand where you need to go until we know where you are. So I always encourage people along your lines, before we go out and just worry about our cortisol, let's talk to ourselves or notice ourselves, right? I don't know if you have your patients do this, but notice if you're in perimenopause, I can tell you that, when my estrogen walked out the door, I definitely had feelings of no buffer, right? But let's notice that. I reacted weird today. What is that about? How did I feel about it? Or I did my usual run or my usual whatever activity, and it felt this way, it felt that way. Not only so you get to know yourself, so that you're not reacting all the time, you start to recognize yourself. But then if they ever go see someone like you or me, and we're digging deep, we're asking the questions, and what about this? And that you'd actually know how to respond, right?
Oh, for sure. One of the things that I tell, particularly menopausal women who are starting to have these symptoms and hot flashes and they're panicking, justifiably so, it can be scary, as you probably know. I tell them to journal it, have your phone or whatever way you take notes right beside you. And when you're having that hot flash, write down what's going on. Did I just get upset about something? Did something at work happen that am I preparing for a big talk? Am I getting ready to go to sleep? Did I have a cup of coffee an hour ago? Things like that, because to your point, if you can get to know yourself better, that is hugely productive information that your healthcare providers, trainers, and coaches can use to help you get from A to B.
Excellent. Excellent. I love that confirmation. Well, I would be remiss if having an endocrinologist in front of me, we did not walk down the road of hormone replacement therapy. So if any of you have listened to me lately, you've heard me say, as pertaining to musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause, which is how I'm now going to name the nomenclature. I'm putting a couple papers in the orthopedic literature patterned after the genitourinary syndrome of menopause. But I have said in relation to that, things women say to me, you are not falling apart and you are not crazy. I'm going to validate that you are hurting all over, that you are having joint pain you never had, that your shoulder no longer moves. And one of the many things that I suggest to women is to evaluate for themselves whether hormone replacement therapy is right for you. And I usually start with the book that changed my life, Estrogen Matters, which is all the data in one place. But I want you to go way back. I want you, because I find even though there are many knowledgeable women that are listening, there are many knowledgeable men and women that don't have a knowledge. What is hormone replacement therapy? Who needs what in terms of your uterus? And how do you help a patient, or what questions do you suggest a patient evaluate to make this decision? Because it's not a decision that paternalistically many of us put on our patients. We help them evaluate personally, even though we have personal opinions. The day of medicine is gone where we're the the Lord and Master, we make your decision. So that's a three-pronged question there, Doctor.
Sure. So I think before we understand hormone therapy, we kind of have to understand what are the hormones doing at the time we're considering that therapy, because the therapy is treating certain things that are different, whether you're in the perimenopausal stage versus the menopause stage. In perimenopause and menopause are two very hormonally different phases. What's happening in perimenopause is the hormone cycles are becoming chaotic. The messaging between the brain and the pituitary gland, which initiates a lot of the hormone production by the ovaries, the messaging, the conversation, which is normally, in our reproductive years, it's pretty straightforward. The pituitary talks to the ovaries, they talk back and forth, ovulation happens, baby either comes or doesn't come, and then the period happens, you start over again. This conversation between the hormones happens all the time. In perimenopause, they're like all speaking different languages and they can't hear each other. And this creates chaos. And because there are estrogen receptors in nearly every part of our body, they're in the ligaments, the tendons, the muscles, they're everywhere. This is why when the messaging becomes disrupted, we have this colossal variety of symptoms and signs that we don't really quite know what to do with. So that's perimenopause. Menopause is when we've gone beyond that chaotic transition, and now everything is pretty much back to reproductive quiescence. Your estrogen and progesterone in production in the ovaries is at a very low baseline. Testosterone and androgens, male hormones, are declining as well. And your pituitary hormones are just kind of hanging out up there, not really doing much. So you go from hormonal chaos to hormonal quiescence. And what the body experiences during those two times are two very different things, and they are treated very different ways. So I just need to plug in my laptop. One quick sec. We're going to get.
We don't want you to go away.
No. Okay. I think it's okay. The little red button's on. So in perimenopause, what we try to do to help alleviate some of these symptoms, and the most common things are the moodiness, the hot flashes, and a lot of times the musculoskeletal symptoms start to rear their heads. We usually use birth control pills during that time. And the reason we use birth control pills is because the estrogen exposure is higher. It needs to be, because what it's doing, it's taming the chaos that is still happening, because the ovaries are still producing these hormones, but they're producing them chaotically. So you kind of have to give birth control dosed hormones to even out that chaos. And if you can even out the chaos, then oftentimes you can really help those symptoms. Now, in menopause, The symptoms you're treating, often hot flashes, often vaginal symptoms. The goal's a little bit different. We're not taming or slaying the chaotic hormones. We're just adding some estrogen or progesterone that can help treat the symptom. The hot flashes we're helping to treat. A lot of times when people do take hormone therapy, they do find some relief in their bones and joints. The data is a little bit spotty. The North American Menopause Society cannot yet recommend that we use hormone therapy specifically for the purpose of improving bone and joint health. But there are studies out there that show that in some cases people do get relief. Right. So we use hormone therapy a little bit differently. We're treating symptoms more than we are, quote unquote, replacing. Because really, when hormones are that low, that's where they're supposed to be. That is the normal range for that age group or for that point in our lives. And so we use the hormones to treat the symptoms, not to try to recreate the hormone environment of our 20s and 30s, because that will never happen. Right. So we're using those hormones to treat symptoms. And the symptoms you're treating and the pathophysiology behind them are very different in menopause versus perimenopause.
And therefore, that's why in menopause, because we're treating symptoms, we're not trying to establish levels, there is little or no role for measuring hormones at great expense every month, which is what some women go through. Is that your opinion?
Yes, that is absolutely my opinion. It is also the opinion of the North American Menopause Society. It's also the opinion of the British Menopause Society and the Royal College overseas in Europe. And the reason for that is twofold, and I alluded to these before. One is that a woman's experience of menopause correlates very poorly with her hormone levels, number one. That's why checking them really doesn't do much. Just ask her, just ask her, how you feeling? I still have hot flashes. Okay, so maybe we need to increase your dose. Now, there could be a role for checking to see, okay, I've got her on a really high dose. Why the heck is she still having this? Let's see if she's absorbing it, if I'm giving her a skim patch. There could be a role for that. And you can see, okay, she's absorbing it. But that's really the extent of what I might use a hormone test for if someone is getting treatment.
The other metabolism or the usage once it's in the body. Is it getting in the body? And
is it getting in there?
Yeah. Is it metabolized at all? Too fast, too slow, but not. Because here's what comes, I'm an orthopedic surgeon and I have women every day, 4 or 5 in every clinic coming to talk to me about menopause through their frozen shoulder. And it is remarkable how many people are telling me about their hormone levels at 55 years old. And I'm so glad that you affirm, because I too tell everybody exactly what you just said. There is very little role. Do not have your hormones checked. We're doing this by symptoms. The North American Menopause Society, all the international societies. But yet, doctors are used to drawing labs to do stuff, right? In fact, I had one wayward person tell me about my parents when they were in the hospital. Oh, it's to the point I can just manage them by their labs. I'm like, no, I too am an old-time doctor. You need to put your thumb in her leg to see her edema, right? So I guess I went down the road to say, people listening, please rewind and listen to what Dr. Carla said. There's a difference in where you are in your timeline of hormonal change. And once you are menopausal, there is very little role for having monthly hormone measured. So question that practice if you're in that practice. So estradiol, I prefer women be on transdermal, not oral, right? We've talked about this many times, people who listen to me a lot, because we do not want Premarin is from horse urine. I don't know, something weird sounds to me. Please. And then it passes through the liver, thus the clotting risk and all the other metabolic side effects. Transdermal is through the skin. It has none of those side effects. And then pellets, you can tell us what you think about pellets. I do not tell my patients to do pellets because they're uncontrollable and unchangeable. What are your thoughts about pellets?
With pellets, I'm assuming you're referring to testosterone specifically.
Well, many women come with both. Many
Oh,
women
really? Wow.
estrogen and my testosterone pellets.
Ah, okay. So yeah, pellets. First of all, it's unusual for me to hear about people coming with pellets with estrogen and progesterone alone. But oftentimes, if people are taking testosterone in addition to those things, yeah, they'll be taking pellets. Particularly the problem with pellets with testosterone therapy is the uncontrolled dose. So when you put these pellets in, the dose of the hormone goes up very, very high. And then it comes down and it settles out. And so particularly with testosterone, when it goes above what the normal female reproductive range is, the risk of side effects, some of which are not reversible, is higher, and the safety is uncharted when you are going beyond those normal reproductive age physiological ranges. One can experience temporal balding, which is like that male pattern baldness. People can experience voice changes. Those are irreversible things. That are fairly common when people are taking testosterone therapy that are edging into doses that are higher than physiologic range. So you can't control it as well. I love, if I'm going to give someone testosterone, I love transdermal cream. It's much more controllable, and I typically will check a testosterone level simply to see if she's in that safe therapeutic range or not. Again, with testosterone therapy, I ask her, how are your symptoms? How is your libido? Because that's usually why I'm treating people with testosterone is libido. And if they're telling me they're feeling good, then great. I don't check a level to tell them they should be feeling good. I ask them. I only check levels to make sure they're in a safe place. And the other reason to use levels is to, again, exclude some sort of disease process. If a woman is not on testosterone, she's coming to me with, male pattern baldness and all this stuff, I'm going to check a testosterone level and see if she's got a tumor somewhere.
Yes, that's right.
So I like to use labs to rule out chronic disease and to make sure that my medication's being absorbed, if I have a question about that, and to make sure in the case of testosterone that it's in a safe range.
Excellent. I love that explanation. So we talked about estradiol. If you have your uterus, you must also be covered by micronized progesterone orally. We just talked about testosterone. Something else that a patient brought up to me, she took it upon herself to start self-dosing high levels of DHEA. And then we measured her levels and they were off the charts. And her explanation was she didn't want to take estrogen, but DHEA will be converted. So talk to me about this, because I am not an expert in DHEA.
DHEA is a precursor to androgens and testosterone. And so I think what she might have been referring to is that she didn't want to take testosterone, but if you take the DHEA, it's going to get converted to testosterone. A lot of people take DHEA, and again, in the supplement industry, you can't be complete. You can't rely on the purity, the dosing precision. You just don't know. It's not regulated. And, if you go to a compounding pharmacy, you want to make sure that it's a reputable compounding pharmacy that is PCAB certified, et cetera. DHEA has been shown to be very effective for painful sex. There's actually an FDA-approved product out there that is vaginal DHEA, and it is specifically for women who have pain with sex. So there's a role for it, particularly in vaginal health, but I think the role for it otherwise is much less well-defined.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Well, for women who decide after reading, listening, going to the North American Menopause Society webpage, menopause.org, it has a consumer page as well as physician page. They decide not to do any kind of hormone replacement therapy. What are your best recommendations for feeling better non-hormonally? Because I do have a big cadre of women who either they don't do hormone replacement therapy because they've been misinformed about risk, or they just choose. They're like, I don't want to do that for some reason. They feel like it's not natural. So what is your best advice for people coming out of chaos into stability of midlife?
So a couple things. One is to collaborate with a good coach. Get a coach, because the holy grail lies in fitness and nutrition. You know, it sounds cliche, and people are probably, okay, rolling their eyes. Someone else going to tell me I gotta, eat right and work out.
You do.
Seriously, it's zero.
Yeah.
And because I see this in my infertility patients. They're like, well, what else can I do to help improve my chances of having a baby? Okay, well, you need to move a little more. You need to be the healthiest version of yourself that you can be. And, yeah, but what supplements can I take? And it's like, oh my God, just, crazy.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking for the magic pill. Magic pill, unfortunately, doesn't exist. And so what it comes down to is anything worth it is worth working for. And it doesn't mean that you have to become a marathon runner. It doesn't mean that you have to become a competitive athlete. You just need to move the needle in the right direction. And that looks a little different for everybody. If you're a sedentary individual, go out walking, walk 3, 4, 5 times a week. If you're a marathon runner, let's try lifting some weights. Let's try some new fitness modality that's going to get your body moving and functioning differently. So the magic is in physical movement and muscle health. Muscle health is huge because of the metabolic effects that it has. And mindfulness, breath work, and meditation. That's the other half of the equation, because a lot of what's happening is just so stressful. And a lot of times stress is a trigger for hot flashes in a lot of these symptoms. So if you can kind of gain some awareness within yourself, and you alluded to this earlier, the better you know yourself, the better other people can assist you in reaching your goals. And mindfulness practice is phenomenal for that. It really can help you gain awareness and clarity of your own self. So fitness, nutrition, sometimes we have to kind of reestablish some norms for, how we're going to fuel our bodies, because in menopause, perimenopause, we don't tolerate that ice cream cone the way we do it, right? I used to be able to eat one every night on vacation. Those days are long gone.
Yeah.
I'll be getting hot flashes every night. Alcohol is also something to revisit. My sister's a wine importer. I used to be able to drink a glass of red wine every night with dinner. Oh my God, red wine's my kryptonite now. So, you kind of have to just step back and say, all right, we have to kind of rework some things. So nutrition, fitness, mindfulness, those are the best strategies if you want to try to avoid hormone therapy and do it naturally. Really, they are game changers.
Well, listen to this message, though, that you've just given us, is that I've been on a big conversation with the public about who is going to take responsibility for your health. It's not self-care, it's self-health, right? And I don't say take responsibility in the sense of blaming, like you're to blame for all this, then that is not the point. The point is, it is what it is. This is the most natural thing you want your body to do, is come out of a reproductive phase. I don't know if many, I had my only we have 6 children that we've raised in our family, but I had one biologic child at 40. That's another whole story, because just to put it in there, I think to your point, after 12 years of training, during which I was highly stressed, ate shit in the surgeon's lounge at all times of day, and even as a young woman, I looked thin, but I was thin fat. You know what I mean? Not enough muscle. During my fellowship, I got in the best shape of my life. And to your point, I was unstressed. I was more fit. I was eating great food. Oh, and at 40, I had enough going on to get pregnant. Well, not to say that's the cure-all, but people, there is such wisdom. And so how we use that wisdom that you just said is to realize we are not the victims of time. We have the capacity to take responsibility. And thank God, what Dr. Carla just said, it's just about choices we can make, right? We choose to do all the things you just said. They are not put upon us. And to me, listen to me getting on my high horse, to me, this is the most hopeful direction of the future, is that we can choose by the lifestyle choices. Because you did not tell me oh, it's not hormones, then you have to do some kind of strange treatment or strange surgery or something. No, what you said is that very small, simple changes in fitness, in nutrition, in mindset can pivot our projection for the future. And there's nothing more hopeful than that.
Oh, without a doubt. And not only that, we can also find opportunities as our bodies change. I know for myself, I'm 53 years old. I'm a better athlete now than I was in my 30s. And the reason for that is because I can do more stuff. When I was having to I had some shoulder issues that, not quite sure what they were from, but it took me to a point where I couldn't do push-ups anymore. Push-ups used to be my thing. And taking the time to start from scratch and rework and do more mobility, do more mindset. I got into yoga. I wound up doing some other things when I couldn't do my push-ups and pull-ups. And I found myself pursuing fitness opportunities that I never would have pursued had I not been going through an injury and changes to my body. And what it opened up were these incredible doors, which have allowed me to pursue other fitness avenues that have made me a better athlete now than the very two-dimensional athlete that I was in my younger years. So yeah, not only is it those choices that we make and that we shouldn't be victims. We're not victims. We're champions. And the way you champion yourself is to make those choices, be self-aware, and find opportunity in adversity. I tell my son this all the time. My son, went through high school during the COVID pandemic, and he's struggling now that he's applying for college. And I say, Nick, don't be a victim. Come out of this on top, be a champion, and find your opportunities within the adversity that you're experiencing. And that's what we have to do too. When we're going through all this stuff that is unavoidable, if every woman lives long enough, she's going to go through menopause, and that's okay. There are opportunities within that, and that's what we got to pursue. And we will live and thrive if we are brave enough to pursue them.
Absolutely. Brave enough to pursue them. I love that. So, you know what? I know that you treat all kinds of people, as I do. I treat the elite athletes. I'm a sports doctor. Elite athletes, executives, surgeons, high capacity people. And then I treat people who are not elite athletes. I call us mere mortals. I lift heavy shit 3 or 4 times a week. I zone 2. I am very conscientious, but I'm not out winning races on a podium, right? And there are women in their 40s and 50s, especially endurance athletes, who are still competing at a very high level. So one of the controversial things I hear all the time, although there's no controversy in my mind, is within the mere mortal crowd, there's some very popular books right now that talk about intermittent fasting, the not eating carbs, the benefits for aging and menopause. But we know that if you are a competing athlete or a high level athlete, that calorie restriction, that it is unfavorable, that fasting may not be good because you got to fuel this body, and that carbs are a necessity for fueling. So will you help separate out how the mere mortals in us should behave, how the elite athletes should stick with their elite coaches, and just separate it for me, because there's so much confusion and where's the line?
Well, this is really interesting how, we're at with this question, because this question comes full circle to what we started out with in the beginning, and that is the stress response system and cortisol. Okay. So evolutionarily, I want to start talking about evolution here, because I love this stuff as a reproductive endocrinologist. The way women are wired hormonally is very closely tied with energy availability. When we go through puberty, so when that axis is turned on, this is when we go through puberty, the whole biological purpose is to now get into reproductive competence. The initiation of that and the turning on of those hormonal axes is very, very closely tied to energy availability. This is why many times you see teenage athletes, they don't get their period till they're 17 or 18, because their training and their fueling is out of balance. And the body detects this and says, hey, why am I going to start having babies when there's no fuel around? Mm-hmm. So with the onset of puberty, that just displays the incredibly tight link between energy availability and the stress response system, because it is also tied with procreation and survival of the species. So this is a powerful force. And so when we're talking about women who are perimenopausal, menopausal, and I know Stacey Sims talks a lot about this, why intermittent fasting is not good for these women. Because remember, when we're in perimenopause and menopause and we're losing that estrogen buffer, we are more sensitive to the cortisol response. And because the cortisol response is so closely tied to energy availability in women of all ages, it becomes more of an issue. So I work with a lot of docs, and I do some consultation with a lot of docs that are telling their midlife women that are coming to them saying, I just gained 10 or 15 pounds. What do I do? Boom, intermittent fasting. It's like, ow. What's happening is that she's probably not eating enough because her body just changed very dramatically. She's not eating enough. And if she's not eating enough, the cortisol system's turning on and says, hey, there's a famine around. I'm going to hang on to every possible fat molecule that I can. So what's happening is when we do fasting and we are spiking our cortisol response, that's making the whole fat loss situation worse. And this is more prevalent in just the regular mere mortals in perimenopause and menopause. It's similar to the elite athlete who is in her 20s and 30s, and her fueling and training is out of balance. It's spiking her stress response system. And because in women, that is very closely linked to energy availability, she loses her periods, she starts to lose bone density and get fractures. So it's the same wiring that has different impacts in different stages of life. But later in life, intermittent fasting can be the kiss of death, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to dial down the cortisol. You're not trying to ramp it up. So you have to make sure that these women are eating enough and that they're recovering enough. That's the other thing. You know, you might have a woman who's a recreational marathon runner who used to be able to get away with not warming up and cooling down very much. But guess what? She's in perimenopause and menopause now. Now she's got to devote more time to warm up, more time to cool down, more time to recovery and tissue care. And that's just some small changes you make. And then once she makes them and gets back on track, she's going to be winning marathons again. So that's kind of how that all ties together.
Well, and you know what, that explanation makes so much sense to me. And the way you've paired cortisol response, underfueling, and recovery, I'm sitting here pausing because I'm thinking, okay, when I was not paying attention and I was coming out of perimenopause, because I've always been athletic. I've been always a mere mortal athlete. And then, you know what, if I noticed that I was gaining weight or we had too much body fat and not enough muscle, it was an easy fix. And then I got squarely into this estrogen walking out the door and the changes that come. And it was harder. I was the same as all of you. But I'm a surgeon. So it is very culturally common for me to grab my cup of coffee, work all day long. I may forget to eat because, you know what, I know for sure nobody's dying if you don't eat for one day. People think you will, you won't, because, you know, we tell you to be nothing by mouth. You're not dying. So you know what, you just work all day. I'm telling another surgeon, right? We just work all day. We get to the end of the day. Oh, I didn't eat. I'm so hungry. You pile it on. I did not get control of my body composition and that dreaded, you know, hormonal change, weight gain, until I started lifting weights seriously again. But more importantly, I started fueling. I was probably eating 500 calories on those days when maybe 750 if I threw in some French fries, but right? That is totally under fueling. My basal metabolic rate, if I believe my body composition, is 1,500 calories right now, and I'd like it to be a little higher, but I need more muscle for that to be true. So I need to give my body at least 1,500 calories so that my underfueling doesn't spike my cortisol and make my body think that I'm curled up in a cave somewhere because it's a dark winter, right?
Exactly right. That's exactly spot on.
But every magazine on the shelf, I could name a few of them, tell a woman that less is less. Less is more, but less is less. So I did not start losing weight that I wanted to lose. Well, two things. I gained a lot more muscle, but I recomposed my body to lose fat, because I'm not trying to tell people to lose weight. I could care less about the number, But my body composition did not change until I fueled more. And my body is so not desperate for food right now. It knows that, and intuitively, I have come to understand what my body needs. And our bodies are smart, right? So do not underfuel your bodies. It spikes your cortisol. It makes you go backwards in your mastery of midlife. I love how you brought it back, because we talk about stress a lot in life and mindset, and that can be a whole framework for midlife, actually.
Oh, without a doubt, because in midlife, just hormones aside, not even thinking about hormones, we've ascended to probably the higher echelons of our careers. We have aging parents. We've got kids driving and kids going to college, right? Oh my God. My son just got his license less than 6 months ago. It just was probably one of the most horrifying experiences I've had as a parent, even though he's a very good driver. But my God, my cortisol's been, it's been redlining for about 4 months just because of that. But yeah, I mean, there's so many things: aging parents, kids leaving the house, our jobs. And that changes our relationships with our partners. It's like, okay, all the kids are gone. Now what? I have to get to know you again, and we have to figure this out. So there's so many stressors, independent of what we're going through with the hormones, that is really drawing on the reserves that our body has mentally and physically. And then with the changes that our bodies are going through, that adds a whole other layer. So yeah. And I think a lot of the misinformation out there, I try to see the best in people. I think they just don't understand, because it's really intuitively difficult to wrap your head around the fact that you need to eat more to lose weight. And that just kind of goes against the dogma of, okay, you got to be in a calorie deficit, because I've got so many coaches who I think very highly of, who, because I consult with lots of other practices with this sort of thing. And so many coaches are like, okay, I got her on 1,200 to 1,400 calories. And I'm like, oh my God, is she sleeping all day? Because even if she's sleeping, she needs more fuel than that. And so it's a matter of educating our coaches and the people who are, out there, putting this information forward, that no, the hormone system is really complicated and doesn't like this. Right. So, and we're learning more and more about it every day. Just like in medicine, it's advancing really fast. This area of health is as well. So I think we just got to kind of spread the word and, help women get on the right track instead of the wrong track.
Absolutely. And so as women do that, as people are listening, my advice is always, and it's not perfect advice, but my baseline advice is talk to people like you and I who have done the work. Listen, 12 years, including medical school, a 6-year residency, a fellowship, thousands of hours of reading. We have to reboard certify periodically, and go to people first who have done the work. This is not opinion. This is your life. And so find a double board certified OB/GYN reproductive endocrinologist like Dr. Carla, or a double board certified orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine expert like me. So as we finish, I always tell people who ask my opinion, or people ask me all the time, what is the most important thing you have to say to women or men? It doesn't matter who it is, but mostly my audience is women. My most important thing I say, because I'm going to ask you as we finish here, is all this advice is amazing. And you can bank on the advice that you just got from Dr. Carla and that you get from me, because I am never going to lie to you. However, none of it matters unless you believe that you are worth the daily investment in your health. You have to believe that you as a person is worth the work, the investment, the investigation, because nothing else matters until you believe that you are worth it and that time is well spent in you. So that is always my parting answer to people. What do you want people to know as we sign off today, Dr. Carla?
It's very related to what you just said, and that is, don't see your body as the enemy, because it's not. And I know it feels like it is when things are changing and the hot flashes are keeping you up at night and the anxiety is paralyzing, where you can't do some of the things that you've done before. It's very easy to develop that relationship with your body, saying, why many women feel betrayed. I know I did when I first started going through this process. But if you can understand your body needs a friend right now, and your body needs you to listen, just like a friend in need, you need to listen. And when you listen, it's not a matter of surrendering. It's a matter of finding solutions and reworking things in a little different way, and not by just forcing the issue. It's like, okay, I can't do push-ups anymore, but God damn it, I am going to go out and I'm going to do them anyway. And then I'm seeing you for a rotator cuff surgery, So what you have to do is say, this is what I did with myself. I said, all right. And, with the help of my good coach, after very tearful conversation, she said, you need to go back to pain-free movement and go back to basics. You need to make your shoulders your friends again. And so that's what I did. And now I'm stronger than I ever was. And so don't make your body the enemy. Listen to what it needs. It's been your friend for life. It will continue to be your friend for life. And just listen and be aware and be willing to think outside the box and rework some things. And no doubt your body will be there for you forever.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody can find you on Instagram. I'm going to post your website and your practice in the show notes, but I hope that those of you listening will seek out Dr. Carla on all the avenues where she shares amazing information. And I'm so thankful for you today, and I can't wait for you to make your move in the future.
Yeah, well, I can't wait either. And thank you, Vonda, for having me. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. I'm Dr. Vonda Wright. See you next week.